Hello and welcome to the Indie Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Polly Campbell. Hey, Polly, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am excited to have you here and to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you. Polly Campbell is the author of You Recharged, How to Beat Fatigue Mostly, Amp Up Your Energy Usually, and Enjoy Life Again Always, and three other books. She's the host of the Simply Write with Polly Campbell podcast. And I've had the pleasure of chatting with Polly on her podcast. And she is a regular writers conference speaker and magazine contributor. And I became aware of Polly when I was reading my July-August 2025 issue of Writer's Digest magazine, and I found an article that Polly had written called Participation Prize. And I just loved what it had to say so much that I invited Polly to join me on the podcast to talk about it. And Polly, do you just want to start out talking a little bit about what triggered the idea for you for that concept behind Participation Prize?
I loved writing that because it kind of opened up a new world of thinking for me too. I have several friends, people that I know from my writers group that have entered various contests over the years. I speak at different conferences and I'm a writer myself, obviously. And so I'm always getting these mailers, these emails about different things happening in the forums, different contests coming up. And I thought, I wonder what the deal is. I wonder who enters these things. You know, hundreds and thousands of people sometimes enter them, the bigger ones, Writer's Digest, and some of those other contests. So, does everybody hold out the hope of winning the grand prize and getting the publishing deal, or what's the deal? And so, I started by talking to a guy I know in my writers group who's a published author named Joel Schumacher. And he was telling me, like, no, it has nothing to do with whether I'm going to win or not. And I thought that was an interesting concept in a world where we're so competitive and we're all about the outcomes. He does it for a whole lot of other reasons, and that was intriguing. So I pitched the idea, and that's how that developed.
So, when you were thinking about this idea of thinking about contests beyond the "I hope that I win and I have an entry on my resume," what was the thing that was most appealing to you right off the bat?
Well, I had done one a few years ago as kind of a lark. I got talked into it, peer pressure, whatever. I did it in between going to a Christmas bazaar and cooking a meal for a family celebration we were having and all these other things. And it was just fun. It just I let my guard down a little and wrote something that I didn't expect to be paid for, something that wasn't on deadline. It is on deadline. The contests have a time you have to turn it in, but it was a looser kind of structure. And when I started talking to other people who entered the contest, what really struck me is they wanted to know their work was going to be read. They wanted the pressure of having a finite timeline and somebody that was going to read it. So the deadline and the audience. And they also wanted to be pushed out of their comfort zone in a way that they felt safe. As writers, we know that no matter how many years we've been working on our stuff, no matter how many edits we've gone through, it always gives you butterflies a little bit when you finally hit send on the manuscript or send that query out or publish a book. And after all this time you've been working on it, it's now going to go to your audience. And I think there's something useful about doing that. This group wanted to have that experience and right elevate their writing in kind of a safe environment without having much at stake. Their business isn't at stake for them if they win or lose this contest. It was more the process of writing.
It must especially be interesting for someone like you who does a lot of contributing to magazines paid. And was it hard for you to get past the idea of, like, loosening yourself from that idea that you were writing something that someone was definitely going to pay you for?
It's hard for me to get rid of that idea in my daily life, right? Because as a writer, I've written nonfiction books, so I've been on contract before I've written them. The Substack is, all me. I self-published that, but I'm working on a very tight schedule for that. And I've written hundreds of magazine articles, and that's how I've made my living. And so I don't write them until recently, unless I had contracts and I knew I was getting paid. So to write for a contest, just as a lark when it's my full-time job, it felt like a luxury. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean I don't have to worry about every little and I did, right? Because we're professionals. I still want to turn in what I thought was good work. But for me, it was much more the exercise of learning what it felt like to write for me again, without worrying about the cover design, without worrying about how the thing was going to get edited, without worrying about when it was going to appear or not appear, or if every last detail was managed. It was freeing. And I did some I wrote something, in many of the contests, and the one I did, you get a prompt and you have a deadline and you get a genre. So that kind of nails, helps you with your structure a little bit. But then you have like 750 words in the one I did, I think it was. It might have even been short, 250 maybe. They're all different lengths. And I just played with it. I wrote a ludicrous little story and I had the best time. And honestly, it had been a while since I felt that kind of freedom and that kind of fun. And so I actually changed a few things up after that contest because it reminded me of why I came to writing to begin with. And it wasn't to worry about every last dollar, it was to create the stories and to experiment with structure and to try some things creatively that I hadn't done for a while when I became a professional.
In your bio and the fact that you're writing articles for Writer's Digest, it focuses very much on nonfiction. Can you talk a little bit about how participating in fiction-oriented contests was that paving the way to longer work, paving the way to other stories, paving the way to anything else, or was it strictly sort of for the some of the benefits that you're talking about from a psychological point of view?
When I did that contest for me, I did it because I wanted to be in the community of writers that were doing it. I knew a number of people. I wasn't friends with them, but we were friendly. And there was a forum once you completed the assignment where you got together and you talked about your stories. And it was invigorating to be with people, writers from all walks of life, all experience levels, all genre experience, self published, traditional published. It didn't matter. We were coming together to just laugh and have fun about story. But I honestly believe, and I talk about this in my own work and at conferences, to become a better writer, you are helped by writing everything, by learning about everything. When I write a nonfiction magazine article, I want you to read the whole thing. When I write a book, I want you to read the whole thing. So I'm really tuned into the opening of that article, into the tension of the stories I'm sharing in the book. I build scenes into my nonfiction. And I'm working on a novel now, and I'm doing those same things too. So while our information is coming from different places, when we are writing, my information in nonfiction is heavily researched, it's based on interviews and science, journal, write journal articles and so forth. And I don't do it that way in my fiction, in my novel, but it absolutely comes from experiences I've had in life or experts I've talked to about the law or whatever it is I need to know that my characters are doing in the novel. But both of those things are held together by people you care about, your characters, right? In nonfiction, they're real people. In fiction, they're characters. They're held together by real conflict and tension that humans experience and go through. And they're held together by good story structure and sentences and word choice. So I was writing fiction and allowed me to be a little freer in the contest because I didn't have to research anything. That just came from me. But boy, I really believe the mechanics of good writing, they have to be present in anything you write, even if it's an email. And when we write anything, that's good practice for me, right? It helped elevate my game in all genres, all formats, all structures.
I'm surprised to hear that idea of pursuing community was one of your drivers for entering contests because I think most people, they think of you just send off your entry and pretty soon you hear back or you don't hear back or maybe if you're a winner you get included in the community. Can you just talk not necessarily about specifics but as an example, like were the communities that you then became a part of, were they like on a social media platform, were they on Discord or something like that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
That surprised me too because I'm not a joiner. I mean, I'm a true writer introvert in that I love sitting by myself and making things up. So that surprised me. But it was a couple members of my writers group who talked me into it and I liked them and I wanted to see what they were all raving about. And I did New York City Midnight, which is a big one. There are many others out there. Not all of them have community. I know that Writer's Digest, you do send your entry out and it's an isolated thing. But many of the bigger contests that are focused, the organizations that are focused exclusively on contests, will have communities. You submit your thing and you find out who else is writing in the mystery trope or the romance trope or whatever. For the group that I participated in, not only was it the group of other writers that I knew that formed a Facebook group to do this contest. So we were all on this Facebook page. And then each of the writers in that group invited somebody they knew. So I knew two people in the group of 50 that were all doing this one contest. But the contest itself had a forum where you could go on and see what other people were up to, and people were sharing their words, their prompts, and they were sharing their experience. I know some others from the research for the article have forums where you can get on like a basically a Slack. They call it's different forums depending different platforms, but you could get on and those linger long after the contest. So when I was writing the article, some of the sources for the article came from people that had never met each other, but they said, "Oh, you should talk to this guy. He just won this contest." Or you should talk to this guy. I met him through that, and now we're best friends. I mean, one guy lives in New York, one guy lives in Washington State. They've never met, and now they talk to each other all the time, every day, because they met each other through the form of the contest. They hit it off. They think the same way. They write the same kind of stories, and they support each other in other work that they're doing. So I think in a world that feels like a one-off, we are not in person very much anymore. It can feel very isolating. And to be in a cluster of people that are not only having fun writing again, but they care about it enough where they want to get better, where they want to be out in the world talking about writing. It's invigorating. It's a great way to meet up with people and form groups with people that care about the things we care about. I really enjoyed that. That surprised me very much.
It is a plus for looking for those contests that are aligned with what you're hoping to get out of it. So, for example, I can imagine that some of the contests that I'm aware of are very general, like if the only criteria is word count. And so you get this wildly different, some people are writing fantasy and some people are writing noir and some people are writing sort of slice of life and on and on. And so if you had a community of those people, it might be interesting. But, if someone wanted to improve their craft and they were writing noir, they might not want to be soliciting input on their craft from somebody who is writing fantasy and vice versa. And so if that idea of exchanging ideas about your area, your genre is important to you, then I think pursuing those contests that are both focused on your genre and have a community aspect would be important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And again, like anything, you can opt in or not, right? And you might read something that somebody else is writing that is more in line with your regular genre, and that might be a way to connect. But also to your point, there are specific contests for the genres themselves. There are contests for romance writers, contests for mystery writers. So if that's important to you to connect with people in a specific genre, that might be something to look into as well.
Yeah. I entered a short fiction contest once where it was the bad guy had to win and profanity was encouraged.
That's
The
well,
bad guy
that's
winning
fun.
is not that far outside of my comfort zone, but profanity encouraged is a little bit because I got dinged on my first book among the pool readers. The only consistent negative reviews I've ever gotten have been, "That first book is really sweary." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll back off on the sweary part a little bit," but that
That's
was really fun.
actually interesting because I have a character now who is a little sweary, and I'm like, I don't know. Do people? I mean, that can be a real turnoff, right? I'm back
Yeah.
and
Well, I'll just share a story, maybe, we'll figure out some way to tie this into the topic at hand, but I wrote my first book, The Sense of Death, and I didn't have a sense of who my audience was gonna be, so I was just writing it for myself, and then as I was getting to promote it, I promoted it on, I think, Fussy Librarian is the one where you have to say, like, how violent is it? How sweary is it? How, like, explicit is it? And they actually had a guideline, like, how many times you could use a certain word for each of the levels. I was like, "Oh, it's probably, like, moderate or whatever." And I thought, "Well, I should probably count." And it turned out that I think I had 17 F-bombs, and the cutoff was, like, 5 or something like that, 3. So I had to put it in the, like, very sweary category, and at the same time, some of my reviewers were saying, they didn't like it so sweary. And so I went in and I thought, after like 8 F bombs, people probably get the idea that this, like, I could take out quite a few of them and I didn't
Mm,
feel like I was losing anything. But,
that's a good point. They
um,
get character after a few.
yeah, yeah. But I wrote a story. I did not, actually, it wasn't for a contest. It was for an anthology. I didn't get placement in the anthology, but it was a very fun story and I sell it as a standalone, but I have a big warning in the front that this was written for an anthology that encourages profanity. So you have been forewarned. I think that you talked a little bit about the idea of good pressure. Can you say a little bit more about that? Of the idea of a benefit of the contest being that they apply a little bit of pressure through deadlines.
It's a mixed bag for me because I just got through saying, I'm always writing on deadline. I'm always writing for the paycheck. And so why would I want to do a contest where there is another deadline? But I do think there's something very important about having structure. I think it's important to have structure in our books, in our articles, in essays, whatever we're writing, because when we have those boundaries, it allows us to play within the boundaries, to get a little looser, maybe to experiment and still have the training wheels to guide us and the reader through the story. So I think that's essential. I know for me that if I felt like it didn't matter to anyone else, that I could just do it whenever, that there would always be something more important to do. Because to be honest, as much as I wanted to do it, it took me far out of my comfort zone. And that sounds silly, but it's the truth. I write, like I said, on contract. I don't write for myself as often as I would like to. And I certainly don't write things in a 24-hour period. And the one I got a prompt it comes out at midnight, and I had until midnight the next day to turn in this story. And I have a whole life. It was a Saturday. I have a whole life I'm leading. So it was going to be a story that didn't get the kind of attention I'm used to giving my work. And I would have beat that thing in the ground. I would have second guessed myself on everything, and I never would have gotten it out. Or if I did get it out, it would have been so polished and refined that I would have lost the energy and the silliness and the fun that was really part of the story and part of my experience. And so I think the deadline for many of us are what makes it go, right? It's that structure that we need to end it and start something else. And in this case, it helped me to know it was only 24 hours. I could be done. I have work to do on Monday, whatever. I could be in and done, and it was going to be a limited time. And it also was refreshing to have something that I could finish quickly. When you're writing a book, jeez, it takes forever for me to write a book, and many of the articles I write are longer and take place over 6 weeks. To write something in 24 hours was refreshing and satisfying because I got to see it right there, and I knew I couldn't make it any better. I did what I could, sent it off, and, that was a small win, and I think a lot of small wins, the incremental progress we make that improves our writing, and that felt satisfying.
It is interesting what you're saying about sometimes it's possible to polish too much. That something is so
Absolutely.
polished that there's like, you can't get traction on it anymore, is the way I think about it. And it would be very interesting to take a scenario like you're describing. You have to write the story in 24 hours and then like set it aside and then go back and do a more polished version, set that aside, and then go back to both of them later on and say, which one of these is better and why? And, what lessons would I want to carry forward to my other work through that analysis?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting exercise. I'm very big on revision. I teach about revision. I think about revision. I'm a heavy reviser in my own work. And yet I think you're right. I think there's a point when we can revise and edit that energy right out of the piece. And that's a danger. And in this format, I couldn't do that. And there was a certain vitality that came. And I like that. And my buddy, one of the guys who does contests year round, he turns his stories into anthologies and short stories, and he's published many of them. So whether he wins or loses, he wants the raw material. He wants the energy behind the piece that you're talking about. And then he'll come back, after submission or after it's been juried, and he'll come back and look and either revise further or slightly tweak the focus to fit in the anthology or whatever it is he's working for. And he's produced two books that way. And his first energy is just really great and creative and weird and different, and I think that's what we aspire to somewhat as writers.
Well, this is sounding very meaningful to me because I write and Kinnear suspense shorts, and listeners know why I do that, so I won't go into it again. But one of those stories is the one that came out of the bad guy has to win and there has to be profanity. And my goal was to have 12 of them, one set in each month of the year, and call it a year of Kinnear, and would be 12, suspense thriller kind of short stories. And when Mark Lefebvre and I wrote Taking the Short Tack in 2020, I put that in there. This is something I could do once I have 12 of them. I'm going to put them out as a year of Kinnear. And Mark and I, by the time this comes out, the second edition of Taking the Short Tack will have been launched. And Mark was reading through it and he got to the part where it said, I'm going to put them together as a year of Kinnear. And he said, well, you've done that already, right? So, like, you know what? 5 years later, I still have not done it because I have like nine. I need three more. Um, and so exactly what you're saying, that your friend benefited by putting together those collections or those anthologies with those stories. I think I need to enter some contests so I can get the last three stories done. Get that
Well,
out.
and the guy I'm talking about, he said straight up, "I would not write without a deadline." And
Yeah.
he has another full-time job, so writing is something he does on his own time at night and weekends. And he's like, "I have too much going on, and I love it when I do it, but I would not do it. I need the deadline." And so he finds that through the contests.
Yeah. And the other benefit I can see from that is that I am focusing more. I should have been doing this before, but I'm adding author's notes to the stories as I'm finishing them. And it would be very fun to have an author's note that was related to the contest for which a story was written. And it would also be fun because, like, let's say, I know in the Writer's Digest article, you said one of your articles was about a sleeping bag. And I thought it would be very fun at the beginning of an entry in your collection to say, I wrote this because the prompt I got was that it had to be about a sleeping bag. And I think readers would get tickled by that.
I love the idea of author notes, first of all. I think that is so cool because I'm the type of nerd that wants to know all about, like, how did this happen and where did this idea come from, you know? And so I love that idea. And as a reader, I absolutely think that would be a fun. And you know what? We draw inspiration from all weirdo places. I do, a conversation at the coffee shop or something my kid says or something I read. And I think sometimes it's easy to sit in our silo and think, oh, I'm the only one in the world not inspired. When I hear about things like that, your author's notes or where other people get their ideas, it helps me remember, okay, yeah, I'm of this world too. Like we all do it in weird places and we're not alone in our process. There's not one way to get it right. And so I think that's really, yeah, I'd love to see your notes like that. And I think to take inspiration wherever we find it. For me, I needed to write it. Took $25 an entry in a contest to write about a sleeping bag, but dang, I'd never done that before and I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like treating yourself to dinner or something like that.
There you
It's if
go.
you approach it as an entertainment for yourself and then other things come out of it, that's just icing on the cake. And it's interesting, the author's note came about because as Mark and I were working on the second edition of Taking the Short Tack, one of the things that Mark talked about in the first edition was the idea of creating print chapbooks, even for
Mm.
small stories. So I'm always committed to trying anything that I'm writing about or is in a book with my name on the cover. And so I took one of my short stories, and if you're on Drafted Digital, then you can very easily put a story up and it creates a wraparound cover for you. And, you don't have to worry about like it's too tiny to have a
That's
spine,
cool.
but it is very fun. And the reason that I ended up doing the author's note is that I think the minimum page count, I forget what it is, but this is about 24 pages. And it would have been slightly less than was qualified for printing. So I added the author's note to add a page or
That's
two.
genius.
And
That's
then I
brilliant.
added a little picture in front. I made like a little frontispiece
That's
of
cool.
drawing. And I was like, okay, now I have 24 pages. Now I can get it printed.
That
It was,
is smart. I mean, and there's a great example of structure, like pushing you or allowing you to expand ideas that take you. And you had the boundary, but you were able to work within it and expand it into something even bigger beyond.
yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I always wish that I could stand back and say, oh, I put lots of strategic thought into this. And I was like, no, I needed like 4 more pages, and this is how I got it. Um, I wanted to loop back for a second about community because I think that there's that idea of community of just getting to know other people, getting to exchange stories, whatever that might be. And then there's also the community of contests where formally or informally, there's a critique aspect of it. And I have to say, I'm always a little bit uncomfortable personally. I've never been part of a critique group for many, many years because once I got an editor, I thought, okay, I really only need that person's critique. And I was also using beta readers, which I recognize, like people would say, okay, that is a critique group, but it feels a little bit different to me. But the idea of sort of opening my work up to just a pool of people that I don't know from Adam, I would find very uncomfortable. Have you ever been involved in a contest where you had other entrants who were commenting on or critiquing your work?
I have not. I know they're out there. I interviewed for this story some people that have been in those, and I think the whole thing about the contest, I think that's a great point, Maddie, is you have to know your own comfort level, right? You want to read the rights too. If you win the contest or even if you enter, you want to make sure that's not giving full rights to them to do whatever they want with their work, with your
Yeah.
work, right? You want to read the fine print. You want to enter contests where you know what you're getting. If it is a community based where you're going to be judged by other peers or your work is going to be put on a forum where it could be open for other readers, you need to know what you're going in for if that's something you're up to. Now, I will tell you that they have in a writers group, they are other professionals, meaning they are focused on publishing their work and they have published. But I've been in writers groups over the years and most of them have not worked for me because I found that I'd be in environments where people were commenting on things that they didn't really know about. And I wanted feedback that was going to elevate me or at least inspire me or support me, or I went in different ways. So if you're entering a contest and your work is going to be out there for all to see, keep in mind that some of the all to see are people who have never written anything ever, or they've never taken a class, or they're aspiring. They're doing this for fun, which is great, but it may be a different kind of feedback than what you might want. So I would say to that, there are precaution. There are contests out there that promise a whole bunch of stuff and don't necessarily deliver on those things. So beware, go to those that a friend recommends. Look at the forums, make sure the website is polished and there's somebody you could talk to or call. You get a response before sending your money if you need to pay an entry fee, that you know where you're going. And as part of that, make sure you know how your work that you submit is going to be used. And if it's going to be open to public feedback or peer review, make sure that's something you want because not everybody's going to be at the same level as you or have the same support or compassion as you might. And I don't want to put my work up for random people to blast. I mean, that doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be in that kind of environment.
Yeah. I'll just mention if you go to selfpublishingadvice.org and then search for award rating, you'll get to a page where the Alliance of Independent Authors, which is the organization behind selfpublishingadvice.org, has rated awards and contests. And so you know that if a, an award is listed there, then the guiding principles of that assessment are that the event exists to recognize talent, not to enrich the organizers, that receiving an award is an achievement, i.e., they're not just handing out an award to everybody, that the judging process is transparent and clear, that prizes are appropriate and commensurate with the entry fees collected, that entrants are not required to forfeit key rights to their work, and that there is no profiteering upsell. And so, yeah, you can quickly ruin what could be a profitable and creatively inspiring experience if you find yourself enmeshed with a bad player.
Yeah, that's an important point. And also know that there are contests out there where you don't have to pay to submit either. There aren't big publishing prizes, but the same exercise where they'll give you some structure and a deadline, and the winners sometimes are published. And so there isn't necessarily a cost associated with every contest or opportunity you find.
Yeah, it does seem like the kind of thing that could easily have a fun do it yourself aspect. I remember at one point This was years ago, and I can't remember what instigated this, but some writer friends and I had this very short-lived contest that was writing drabbles. So drabble being exactly 100 words, and it would be, we would have like an hour to do it or something like that, and no cost. The community was already there, but somebody just got the idea that like, hey, let's do this for a couple of days. This would be fun, and it was fun, and got some benefit out of it. But we didn't need to make a huge time or energy or financial commitment to that.
Yeah, it comes down to anything in writing and really in life. Make sure you know what you're getting. Like, what is the personal benefit to you? Do you like working on deadline? Do you want people to read your work outside of you? Are you open to the creative experience? If not, if you're going to be crushed if you don't win, probably what I'm talking about isn't going to be for you
Yeah.
because most people, thousands participate and they do it for the exercise, for the practice, for the experience of community, the things we've talked about here. But you got to know yourself. If you're not good, if you don't win, if you don't have time to spare and it would add more stress than joy, maybe this approach isn't for you.
Yeah. Well, Polly, it is always lovely to chat with you. And I had so much fun talking in this wide ranging conversation about writing contests. So thank you again. And please let everyone know where they could go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
Yeah, come find me at pollycampbell.com. The good place to find me now is at simplywrite.substack.com. I have essays there and going to be changing that site up a little bit, talk about courses I have coming up and other ways. And the podcast that Maddie is going to be on is called Simply Write, and you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. We talk to authors all over about how they do what they do. And so track me down. I'd love to see you on the simplywrite.substack.com.
Yeah, I had such a nice time talking with you on your podcast. So everybody should be adding that to their playlist on their
Thank
pod
you. I
player.
love it. And it was great to meet you there. And I've loved this one. I think it's a really rewarding to come together and talk with writers about how we keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah. So great. Thank you.
Thank you.